Sometimes the people closest to death are the ones who wake up the most dangerous. The first time I saw Adrian Blackwood, he was unconscious beneath the cold fluorescent lights of St. Mercy Hospital, and even then, the entire emergency wing moved like the world belonged to him. Nurses stopped talking when his gurney rolled past. Doctors lowered their voices. Security guards suddenly stood straighter. I had worked night shifts for 3 years, and I knew fear when I saw it. This wasn't fear of violence. It was fear of power, the kind that walked into a room before the man himself did. Or in Adrian's case, before they wheeled him in covered in blood and rainwater at 11:42 p.m., 34-year-old male. The paramedic barked while pushing through the double doors. Severe blood loss. Pulse unstable. Possible internal injuries. I grabbed gloves automatically, exhaustion forgotten for the first time in 12 hours. My feet had been aching since midnight yesterday. I'd skipped dinner. My coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. But something about the man on that stretcher made adrenaline hit my bloodstream hard enough to erase every ounce of fatigue. Maybe it was the expensive charcoal suit cut open down the middle. Maybe it was the silver watch still hanging from his wrist despite the chaos around him. Or maybe it was the 6 men in black suits following behind the stretcher with expressions sharp enough to cut glass. One of them grabbed my arm before we reached Trauma 2. "You save him," he said quietly. "Whatever it costs." I pulled my arm free. That's the plan. But when I stepped beside the bed and finally looked at Adrian Blackwood's face, my breath caught in my throat. He looked wrong for a man with his reputation. Too young, too calm, dark hair damp against his forehead, strong jawline shadowed with exhaustion, a faint scar near his temple that somehow made him look more human instead of less dangerous. Monitor alarms screamed above him while doctors moved around the room in controlled panic. Pressure's dropping. We need another line. Where's radiology? I focused on his vitals, forcing myself into nurse mode instead of staring at the most feared man in Chicago lying helpless beneath white hospital sheets. That was when I noticed it. His pupils reacted unevenly, barely noticeable, something most people would miss. But I didn't miss things like that anymore. Not after years of night shifts and too many patients slipping away because someone overlooked one tiny detail. "Wait," I said sharply. Dr. Levin glanced at me without slowing down. "Not now, Grace. His pupils are asymmetrical. He lost blood. That happens." "No," I said, stepping closer. "Look again." The room kept moving around us, but I saw the exact second Dr. Levin realized I was right. His expression changed instantly. "Get neurology down here now." One of the men in suits stared at me from across the room after that, watching me carefully, memorizing me. Adrian's heart rate dropped again. The monitor sound turned sharp and violent. Everyone moved faster. I pressed gauze against his side while another nurse adjusted medication levels. Through all of it, Adrian never opened his eyes. Not once. But his hand moved suddenly against the sheets. Just slightly, like he was trying to reach for something in the dark. "Stay with us?" I whispered before I could stop myself. His fingers relaxed at the sound of my voice. It should have meant nothing. Probably muscle reflex. Probably random. But one of the suited men noticed it too. "He heard you," he said quietly. I ignored him because nurses aren't supposed to care who the patient is outside the hospital walls. Criminal, politician, billionaire, doesn't matter. You treat the wound. You stop the bleeding. You go home. Except Adrian Blackwood didn't feel like a man I could leave behind at the end of my shift. Around 2 a.m., the storm outside got worse. Rain hammered the ICU windows hard enough to sound like gravel against glass. Most of the hospital had gone quiet by then, but his room stayed guarded like a federal vault. I stood beside his bed adjusting his when one of the older nurses leaned toward me carefully. "Do you know who he is?" she whispered. "I know he's my patient. Grace." Her voice lowered further. "That man owns half this city." I looked back at Adrian, at the bruises darkening along his ribs, at the machines breathing beside him, at the sharp lines of his face softened by unconsciousness. Powerful men weren't supposed to look lonely, but somehow he did, and for reasons I couldn't explain yet, that scared me more than the men guarding his door. By 2:43 in the morning, the storm outside had swallowed the city whole. Rain blurred the skyline beyond the ICU windows until Chicago looked like nothing more than lights drowning underwater. Most nights, that hour felt peaceful in the hospital. Exhausted nurses whispering at the station. Coffee machines humming. Patients finally sleeping after hours of pain and noise. But nothing about Adrian Blackwood's floor felt peaceful. Men in dark suits stood outside every entrance with silent earpieces and expensive watches glowing beneath fluorescent lights. Nobody laughed near his room. Nobody relaxed. Even the air felt tense, like the building itself understood who was lying behind those glass doors. I checked his chart again while leaning against the counter, trying to ignore the aches spreading through my lower back. 12.5 hours into my shift, and my body felt held together by caffeine and stubbornness. You should sit down. The voice startled me. I turned to find one of Adrian's men holding out a paper cup of coffee. He looked about 40, broad shoulders beneath a tailored black coat, silver at his temples. Unlike the others, he did not look threatening. He looked tired. I am fine, I said automatically. That is what nurses always say before they collapse. His mouth almost smiled. Almost. I hesitated before taking the cup. Thank you. Vincent, he said. I handle security for Mr. Blackwood. Security. That sounded cleaner than whatever his real job probably was. I wrapped both hands around the coffee, grateful for the warmth. Grace. I know. Something about the way he said it sent a chill across my skin. Not threatening. Just factual. Men like Adrian Blackwood probably knew everything about the people around them. You saved his life tonight, Vincent continued quietly. The doctors missed the neurological signs. I was doing my job. Still, his eyes shifted toward the glass room, where Adrian lay motionless beneath soft blue monitor lights. Most people stop paying attention when they get scared. I am not scared. Vincent looked at me for a long moment. That makes you unusual. Before I could answer, an alarm sounded sharply from inside the ICU room. My pulse jumped. I shoved the coffee aside and rushed back inside. Adrian's oxygen levels had dipped suddenly. Not dangerously low yet, but enough to tighten every nerve in my body. I adjusted the tubing quickly while checking his monitors. Come on, I whispered under my breath. Do not do this tonight. His face remained still beneath the pale hospital light. Too still. For the first time since he arrived, I noticed the shadows beneath his eyes. The exhaustion etched into his features. Power looked different unconscious. Softer. Human. I reached for his wrist to steady the pulse sensor clipped against his skin. Warm. Strong despite everything. Then his fingers moved against mine again. Not random this time. Intentional. Slow. My breath caught. Doctor. I called immediately, but before anyone entered the room, Adrian's hand tightened weakly around mine. His eyes never opened. Yet somehow, he held on like he recognized me. Mr. Blackwood? Nothing. Just the steady pressure of his hand around my fingers. The door opened behind me. Dr. Levin stepped inside while scanning the monitors. What happened? Oxygen dipped for 6 seconds. He stabilized fast. Good catch. Then he noticed Adrian's hand around mine. His eyebrow lifted slightly. Interesting. I gently tried pulling free, but Adrian's grip tightened again despite the sedation. Dr. Levin gave a quiet laugh beneath his breath. Looks like your patient has preferences. He is unconscious. Apparently not completely. He checked Adrian's pupils carefully this time. More even now. Better response. Honestly, Grace, if you had not spoken up earlier, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. We both knew how close this had been. After he left, silence settled back into the room except for the soft mechanical rhythm of machines. Adrian still had not released my hand. Outside, lightning flashed white across the windows. For one strange second, the room glowed bright enough for me to see every detail clearly. The scar near his jaw, the faint stubble shadowing his face, the expensive silver cross resting against his collarbone beneath the hospital gown. And then something else. His lips moved slightly, barely audible. I leaned closer before I could stop myself. Do not leave. The words were rough, broken by exhaustion and medication, but unmistakably real. My heart stumbled hard against my ribs. He was awake. Not fully, not enough to understand where he was, but awake enough to speak. I should have called the doctor immediately. Instead, I stood frozen beside his bed while his hand remained wrapped around mine, like letting go would pull him somewhere dark. You are safe? I whispered quietly. His breathing eased at the sound of my voice. Outside the room, I saw Vincent watching through the glass with an expression I could not read at all. At 3:11 in the morning, the hospital felt less like a place for healing and more like the center of a storm waiting to break apart. I sat beside Adrian Blackwood's bed with my chart balanced on my knee, trying to ignore the fact that his hand was still wrapped loosely around mine almost 20 minutes after he had spoken. Most unconscious patients drifted in and out without memory. But something told me Adrian remembered more than he should. The monitors beside him beeped steadily now. Stable. Finally stable. I should have felt relieved. Instead, my nerves refused to settle. Maybe because every few minutes, one of the suited men outside glanced through the glass to check whether their boss was still breathing. Or maybe because each time lightning flashed outside, Adrian's face sharpened beneath the pale ICU light until he looked less like a patient and more like the kind of man people warned their daughters about. Dangerous. Beautiful. Untouchable. I carefully adjusted the blanket over him with my free hand. You were supposed to let go eventually, I murmured softly. His fingers tightened instantly. I froze. A quiet breath escaped him, almost like he heard me even now. My pulse stumbled again. Okay, I whispered. Message received. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Outside the window, thunder rolled low across the city while water streaked down the glass in silver rivers. I checked his foreline again, mostly to distract myself from the strange tension curling through my chest. That was when Adrian suddenly spoke again. Grace. My head snapped up. His eyes remained closed. But he said my name clearly this time. Deep voice rough with exhaustion and medication. Real. How do you know my name? I asked before thinking. No answer came. Just slow breathing and the steady warmth of his hand around mine. I stared at him for several seconds, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But I had not. Patients did not magically know nurses' names unless someone told them. And nobody inside this room had used mine since the beginning of the shift. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Vincent stepped quietly inside, carrying another cup of coffee. You should eat something, he said. It is almost 4. I blinked at the clock on the wall in disbelief. 4 a.m. already. I did not realize it was that late. Vincent noticed Adrian's hand still holding mine, but said nothing about it. Somehow, that made it more embarrassing. Any change? He asked quietly. Small neurological responses. He spoke twice. Vincent's expression sharpened instantly. What did he say? I hesitated. Mostly disoriented things. I did not know why I avoided mentioning my name. Maybe because saying it out loud would make this entire situation feel stranger than it already was. Vincent studied me carefully for a moment before nodding once. You should know something, Grace. His voice lowered slightly. Mr. Blackwood does not trust people easily. I am his nurse, not his friend. Still, his eyes shifted toward Adrian. He let you stay? I almost laughed at that. He is unconscious. Not in the ways that matter. Before I could answer, Adrian's monitors changed rhythm sharply. My training took over immediately. I leaned forward, checking his oxygen and pulse. His breathing had quickened slightly beneath the oxygen line. Restless. Uneasy. Adrian, I said carefully. His head moved faintly against the pillow. Then suddenly his hand released mine only to grab my wrist instead. Stronger this time. Intentional. His eyes opened. Dark gray. Heavy with exhaustion, but fully awake. For one impossible second, neither of us moved. The entire world seemed to narrow into the space between us. His gaze locked onto mine with terrifying focus despite the medication still running through his system. I had seen fear before. Pain. Shock. But never eyes like his. Calm even now. Controlled. Like waking up in intensive care surrounded by machines and injuries was merely an inconvenience. You stayed, he said quietly. My mouth went dry. You almost died. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Yet here you are. The monitor beside him sped up beneath the silence stretching between us. I realized suddenly how close I was standing to him. Close enough to smell rain still lingering faintly in his dark hair. Close enough to notice the exhaustion behind his eyes that no amount of power could fully hide. You should rest, I said softly. Adrian kept staring at me like he was memorizing something important. What time is it? Almost 4. His gaze flicked briefly toward the storm outside the windows before returning to me again. Long night for you, Grace Miller. Hearing my full name from his lips sent a chill straight down my spine. How do you know my last name? This time, Adrian actually smiled. Slow. Tired. Dangerous. I know everything that matters. The moment Adrian Blackwood smiled at me, I understood why powerful men terrified people without ever raising their voices. It was not loudness. It was certainty, the kind that settled into a room and made everyone else adjust around it. Even lying in a hospital bed with wires attached to his chest, Adrian looked completely in control. I stepped back instinctively, creating space between us before I forgot I was his nurse and not another woman being pulled into whatever dangerous world existed behind those gray eyes. You should not be talking this much, I said quietly while checking the monitor beside him. You lost a dangerous amount of blood, and yet you keep arguing with me instead of sleeping. His voice remained rough from exhaustion, but stronger now. More awake. Occupational hazard. His gaze stayed fixed on me while thunder rolled outside the ICU windows again. You always stay this calm around strangers? You are not exactly acting like a stranger. No. The single word landed softly between us. I am not. My pulse quickened before I could stop it. I focused on adjusting his foreline instead. Professional. Safe. Familiar. You need rest, Mr. Blackwood. Adrian. Hospital policy says otherwise. Hospital policy also said I was not supposed to survive tonight. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. There were shadows under his eyes now that the adrenaline had faded. Pain hidden carefully behind control. Most patients showed fear after waking in intensive care. Adrian only looked annoyed by the inconvenience. You came very close, I admitted quietly. If we had waited another 20 minutes to catch the neurological pressure. But you did not wait. His gaze softened slightly in a way that somehow felt more dangerous than his coldness. You noticed. I swallowed hard. Nobody had ever looked at me like that before. Like my attention mattered. Like my presence in the room had changed the outcome of something important. Before I could answer, the ICU doors opened abruptly. Dr. Levin entered carrying a tablet, while two additional security men stopped outside the room. Adrian's expression changed instantly. Not dramatic. Just colder. Controlled in a sharper way. Good, Dr. Levin said with visible relief. You are awake. Adrian never looked away from me. Apparently. Dr. Levin glanced between us briefly before clearing his throat. Your condition is stable for now, but you need another 24 hours of monitoring minimum. No stress. No movement. Absolutely no leaving this floor. Adrian finally shifted his eyes toward the doctor. You say that like I had vacation plans. Mr. Blackwood. Doctor. The tension between them felt strange. Respect mixed carefully with caution. Dr. Levin handed the tablet to me instead of Adrian. Grace, can you review his medication schedule with me outside? I nodded immediately, grateful for an excuse to breathe normally again. But, before I could move, Adrian's hand caught my wrist one more time. Warm fingers circling gently but firmly. She stays. Silence filled the room instantly. Even Dr. Levin hesitated. Mr. Blackwood, she has been here almost 13 hours. Adrian's gaze remained locked on mine. Then she should sit down. My stomach flipped unexpectedly. I am perfectly capable of deciding whether I need a break. One side of his mouth curved faintly. Good. I dislike obedient people. Dr. Levin rubbed his forehead like he already regretted this entire night. Grace, 5 minutes outside, please. Adrian released my wrist slowly this time. Like he already knew I would come back. I followed Dr. Levin into the hallway where the smell of coffee and antiseptic hit me all at once. The adrenaline keeping me upright began fading hard. You okay? He asked quietly. Honestly, I am too tired to know. He nodded sympathetically before lowering his voice. You should be careful with him. Because he is dangerous? Because men like Adrian Blackwood notice things. My eyes drifted unconsciously toward the glass ICU room. Adrian watched me through the window, even now. Calm. Silent. Focused entirely on me while rain battered the city outside. I am just his nurse, I said quietly. Dr. Levin gave me a look that made my chest tighten immediately. Grace, he said gently. I do not think he sees you that way anymore. Before I could answer, one of the security men near the elevators suddenly touched his earpiece. His expression sharpened instantly. Another guard moved toward the entrance doors without a word. The entire atmosphere on the floor shifted in seconds. Colder. Alert. Wrong. Vincent appeared from the far hallway, moving quickly but calmly. We have a situation downstairs, he told the guards quietly. My stomach tightened immediately. What kind of situation? Vincent's eyes flicked briefly toward me before settling on the ICU room behind the glass. The kind that means nobody leaves this floor tonight. And inside the room, Adrian Blackwood was already watching the hallway like he knew exactly what was coming. Hospitals have a sound when something is wrong. Not alarms. Not shouting. Silence. The kind that spreads too fast through hallways until everyone starts holding their breath without knowing why. At 4:26 in the morning, St. Mercy Hospital went completely silent. I stood near the ICU desk clutching a patient chart, while security guards suddenly repositioned themselves near every entrance on the floor. Nurses stopped talking mid-sentence. Even the elevators seemed slower somehow. Vincent spoke quietly into his earpiece before looking directly at me. "Grace, I need you inside Mr. Blackwood's room." "Why?" "Because he asked for you." I almost laughed from exhaustion. That is not an answer. Vincent's expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened slightly. "Please." Something about the word please unsettled me more than an order would have. I stepped back into Adrian's ICU room while rain battered the windows hard enough to shake the glass faintly. He was sitting more upright now despite every instruction telling him not to move. One hand rested near the blanket over his ribs while his gaze stayed fixed on the hallway outside. Watching. Calculating. "You should not be sitting up," I said immediately. Adrian looked at me instead of answering. "Lock the door." My stomach tightened. "Excuse me." "Grace." His voice stayed low and controlled. "Lock the door." Every rational part of me wanted to argue. Nurses do not lock themselves inside ICU rooms with men rumored to own half the city through fear and money. But something in his expression stopped me. Not panic. Not fear. Urgency. I crossed the room slowly and locked the door. The click echoed louder than it should have. Adrian relaxed slightly afterward. "What is happening?" I asked quietly. "People are looking for leverage." "Leverage against you?" His eyes met mine carefully. "Against anyone near me." A chill slid down my spine. "You think someone is coming here?" "I think someone already arrived downstairs 20 minutes ago pretending to visit a patient." The room suddenly felt colder despite the heat running through the vents. "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian studied me for a long second before answering. "Because you saved my life tonight." Something about the way he said it made my chest ache unexpectedly. Honest. Direct. No games. Outside the glass walls, I saw Vincent speaking to another guard near the elevators. Their movements remained calm, but tension rolled through the floor like invisible smoke. Adrian shifted slightly against the pillows, and pain flashed briefly across his face before disappearing behind control again. "You should rest," I said softly. "You keep saying that like it is possible." Most patients try harder not to argue with nurses. One corner of his mouth lifted faintly. "Most nurses are afraid of me." I adjusted the foreline carefully to avoid looking directly at him. "Should I be?" Silence stretched between us while thunder rolled outside again. "Probably," Adrian admitted quietly. "But you are not." Before I could answer, the lights flickered once. Every monitor in the room beeped sharply before stabilizing again. My pulse jumped instantly. Somewhere down the hallway, a nurse gasped softly. Adrian's entire posture changed at once. Alert. Focused. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with physical strength. "Stay away from the windows," he said calmly. "Adrian, this is a hospital." "Exactly." His gaze never left the hallway outside. Too many exits. Too many strangers. My mouth went dry. For the first time all night, I realized how little I actually knew about the man in front of me. Not rumors. Not headlines. Reality. Men with guns did not scare entire hospitals because of gossip. They scared people because something had taught them to. A sharp knock hit the ICU door. I flinched automatically. Vincent's voice came through immediately after. "It is me." Adrian nodded once toward the door. I unlocked it carefully. Vincent stepped inside with another man behind him carrying a black umbrella dripping rainwater onto the tile floor. The newcomer looked about Adrian's age. Dark suit. Pale eyes. Expensive watch. He glanced around the room once before focusing entirely on Adrian. "They found the driver," he said quietly. Adrian's expression never changed. "Alive." "Barely." My stomach tightened harder at the conversation I clearly was not supposed to hear. Vincent noticed immediately. "Grace," he said gently. "Perhaps you should take a break downstairs." Before I could answer, Adrian spoke first. "No." The room fell silent. His gray eyes stayed locked on mine while rain crashed harder against the windows behind him. "She stays with me." The words should have sounded possessive. Dangerous. Instead, somehow, they sounded protective. And that frightened me more than anything else that night. By 4:51 in the morning, Exhaustion had settled so deeply into my bones that everything around me started feeling unreal. The storm outside, the armed security on the ICU floor, the billionaire criminal sitting upright in a hospital bed watching me like I was the only stable thing left in the room. Vincent and the other man left after another quiet conversation with Adrian that I pretended not to hear. Something about shipments. Someone missing. A driver who talked too much. I focused on changing for fluids because medicine made sense. Medicine had rules. Human hearts did not. The door closed softly behind them, leaving only me and Adrian inside the dim blue glow of the ICU room again. Rain slid down the windows in endless silver lines while the monitors hummed softly beside his bed. "You should sleep," I said quietly while checking his pulse again. "You are obsessed with that idea. Because your body is trying very hard not to collapse." Adrian watched me for several seconds before speaking again. "And yours?" I almost answered automatically. "Fine. I am fine." The line nurses told better than anyone else. But something about the way he looked at me made the words stick in my throat. "I have been awake almost 20 hours, I admitted instead. There it is. One side of his mouth lifted faintly. Honesty. Do not get used to it. His soft laugh surprised me more than anything else that night. Low, brief, real. It changed his entire face for half a second. Less dangerous, less untouchable, more human than the city probably allowed him to be. I looked away too quickly after noticing that. "You keep doing that," Adrian murmured. "Doing what?" "Running every time you look at me too long." Heat climbed unexpectedly into my cheeks. "I am literally monitoring your neurological response." "Sure you are." I rolled my eyes before checking his medication line again, mostly to hide the fact that my pulse had become embarrassingly uneven. "You flirt with all your nurses?" "Only the brave ones." Before I could answer, pain flickered across his face suddenly, sharp enough that he inhaled carefully through his nose. Instantly my focus returned. "Where?" I asked softly. "Ribs." I adjusted the bed slightly before checking the monitors again. Scale of 1 to 10. 4. That means 7. Adrian watched me work silently for a moment. "You notice everything." "It is my job." "No," his voice lowered slightly. "It is who you are." The words hit harder than they should have. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before. Most people noticed nurses only when they needed something. Water. Medication. Help. Adrian noticed me noticing things. And somehow that felt dangerously intimate. I moved toward the medication cabinet to avoid thinking about it too much. "You need another pain dose." "Will it knock me out?" "Probably for a little while. Then stay until I wake up again." I froze with my hand still resting against the cabinet drawer. The request sounded simple, but beneath it was something else entirely. Trust. My chest tightened unexpectedly. "Adrian, please." The word was quiet enough to almost disappear beneath the rain outside. Powerful men were not supposed to sound tired, or lonely, or human, but he did. And for reasons I could not explain, that frightened me more than his reputation ever could. I administered the medication carefully into his foreline, while his eyes remained fixed on me the entire time. "You know," I said softly, "most patients thank nurses with flowers. Flowers die. That is dark." "It is true." The medication slowly began softening the sharpness in his expression. His shoulders eased slightly against the pillows. But even exhausted and injured, Adrian Blackwood still watched the door constantly. Always alert. Always expecting danger. "When was the last time you actually slept?" I asked quietly before I could stop myself. His gaze shifted toward the rain-covered windows. "I do not remember." Something inside me hurt. Hearing that answer, I finished adjusting his blanket before stepping back. "Try now." Adrian looked at me for one long silent moment. "Only if you stay." I should have refused. Professional boundaries. Hospital ethics. Common sense. Instead, I pulled the chair beside his bed closer and sat down quietly. 1 hour, I said softly. "That is all you get." Adrian's eyes closed slowly for the first time, without tension tightening his face. Without fear. His breathing steadied beneath the sound of rain and monitors. And then, just before sleep fully took him, his fingers brushed lightly against my wrist again. Gentle this time. Almost careful. "Grace." His eyes never opened. "Nobody touches you while I am asleep." A chill moved slowly down my spine. Not because the words sounded threatening, but because somehow, impossibly, they sounded like a promise. I woke to warmth around my hand. For one confused second, I thought I was back in nursing school falling asleep over textbooks in the library again. Then the steady beep of ICU monitors pulled me back to reality. My head had tilted sideways against the chair beside Adrian's bed sometime during the last hour. Morning light barely touched the edges of the rain-soaked windows now, turning the city outside pale gray and silver. And Adrian Blackwood was awake again, watching me. His fingers were loosely wrapped around mine beneath the blanket between us like he had been holding my hand for a while, without waking me. My pulse jumped instantly. How long was I asleep? I whispered, straightening too quickly. Adrian's expression stayed calm. 23 minutes. You counted. You looked exhausted. Something about the softness in his voice made my chest tighten unexpectedly. I carefully slipped my hand free before standing up to check his monitors. Stable vitals. Better oxygen. Stronger pulse. Relief moved through me before I could stop it. You are improving, I said quietly. You sound disappointed. I glanced at him. I sound tired. There is a difference. I adjusted the 4 medication mostly to avoid his eyes again. The room felt different this morning. Less tense. Less cold. Maybe because the storm outside had finally started fading. Or maybe because somewhere between midnight and sunrise, Adrian had stopped feeling like a dangerous stranger and started feeling like a man I was beginning to understand. That realization alone should have terrified me. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Vincent entered carrying a garment bag and a fresh cup of coffee. Morning, he said carefully while studying Adrian first. You are alive. That will disappoint several people. Adrian's mouth curved faintly. Try harder next time. Their humor felt strange. Dry. Familiar. Like men who had survived too much together. Vincent handed the coffee to me instead. Black. 2 sugars. I blinked in surprise. How did you know? Mr. Blackwood notices things. Adrian's eyes remained on me over the rim of his water glass. You drink too much caffeine when stressed. Heat climbed into my face again. You have known me for 6 hours. Long night. His voice lowered slightly. Feels longer. Silence settled softly between us after that. Not awkward. Somehow worse. Comfortable. Dangerous men were not supposed to make nurses feel comfortable. Vincent cleared his throat before placing the garment bag near the chair. Doctor says no visitors today. Adrian nodded once. Good. But there is another issue. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Adrian's expression sharpened again. What issue? Vincent glanced briefly toward me before answering carefully. Someone accessed hospital employee records around 3 this morning. Cold moved through my stomach immediately. Adrian's eyes darkened. Whose records? Vincent hesitated exactly half a second too long. Grace's. Every sound inside the room disappeared beneath the sudden pounding of my heartbeat. What? I whispered. Vincent's jaw tightened. We blocked the request before they got a full file. Adrian looked terrifyingly calm after that. Not angry. Worse. Controlled. Who requested it? We are still tracing that. Adrian slowly set the water glass down beside him. No, he said quietly. You are not. Vincent understood immediately. I will handle it personally. My mouth had gone dry. Why would someone look up my records? Neither man answered. Fast enough. Which was answer enough already. Because of me, Adrian finally said quietly. I laughed once under my breath in disbelief. I am a nurse from Southside Chicago who still drives a 12-year-old Honda. You are also the woman who kept me alive. His gray eyes locked onto mine completely. That makes you visible now. Fear finally hit me then. Real fear. Not of Adrian. Not anymore. Fear of the invisible world orbiting around him. The one where people searched hospital files at 3 in the morning and powerful men spoke in calm voices while making terrifying decisions. I crossed my arms instinctively. This is insane. Adrian watched me carefully. Grace. No, seriously. I clocked into work yesterday worried about student loans, and now apparently criminals are researching my employee records. You are under my protection. The words landed softly. Absolutely. My breath caught for reasons I hated understanding. I did not ask for protection. No, Adrian's gaze never left mine. You earned it. Silence stretched between us again, while morning light slowly brightened the room. Somewhere downstairs, a cart rattled through the hallway, and distant nurses laughed softly at the start of a new shift. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. But nothing about my life felt ordinary anymore. Adrian studied me for another long second before speaking again. Go home after your shift. I plan to. You will not go alone. I opened my mouth to argue automatically. Then I looked into his eyes and realized something terrifying. Adrian Blackwood was not making a suggestion. He was making a promise. By 7:18 that morning, the storm had finally passed, but the tension inside St. Mercy Hospital only seemed to grow heavier with daylight. Morning staff moved through the ICU floor pretending everything was normal, while men in tailored black coats stood beside vending machines like statues. Nobody asked questions. Nobody made eye contact for too long. Hospitals taught people when silence was safer. I stood at the sink washing exhaustion from my face with cold water while trying very hard not to think about the fact that someone had searched my employee records in the middle of the night. My reflection looked pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Blonde hair falling loose from my ponytail. Dark circles under blue eyes that had seen too much in 12 hours. You look scared. Adrian's voice came softly from behind me. I turned too fast. You are not supposed to be standing. He leaned one shoulder lightly against the bathroom doorway inside the ICU suite. One hand pressed carefully against his ribs beneath the gray hospital shirt someone had finally changed him into. Even injured, he carried himself with impossible control. You did not answer me, he said quietly. I grabbed a paper towel mostly to give my hands something to do. Someone searched my records. And I laughed once without humor. And normal people usually find that unsettling. Adrian watched me carefully for a long moment. You are not in danger because of who you are, Grace. That is supposed to make me feel better? You are in danger because you matter to me now. The words hit harder than they should have. My chest tightened instantly. Dangerous men were not supposed to say things like that so calmly. Like they were discussing the weather instead of rearranging someone's entire life. I stepped past him carefully toward the monitors again. You barely know me. I know enough. That is not how normal relationships work. Adrian's mouth curved slightly. Good thing I have never been interested in normal. Before I could answer, voices rose sharply outside the ICU room. Not shouting. Urgent. Vincent appeared at the glass doors seconds later with another guard beside him. Both looked tense. Adrian noticed immediately. What happened? Vincent stepped inside carefully. A woman came to reception downstairs asking for Grace. My stomach dropped. Who? She claimed to be your aunt. I do not have an aunt in Chicago. Silence hit the room instantly. Adrian's expression changed in a way I had not seen before. Not cold. Predatory. Calm in the most terrifying way imaginable. Where is she now? Vincent's jaw tightened. Gone before security reached the lobby cameras. Fear slid cold through my entire body. Oh my God. Adrian crossed the room toward me before I realized he had moved. Look at me. His voice stayed low and steady. I forced myself to meet his eyes. You are safe here. People are pretending to be my family now. My voice shook despite every effort to control it. This is insane. Adrian's hand settled gently against my wrist. Warm. Steady. Grace. Something inside me cracked slightly hearing my name in that voice. Calm enough to anchor storms. Nobody gets near you again without my permission. I should have pulled away. Instead, I stood there staring at him while the entire room seemed to narrow around us. The machines. The rain-stained windows. The guards outside. Everything faded beneath the strange intensity in his gray eyes. Why are you doing this? I whispered. Adrian's thumb brushed lightly against the inside of my wrist before he answered. Because when everyone else in that emergency room saw a criminal, you saw a patient. My breath caught. That is my job. No, his gaze softened slightly. That is your heart. Silence stretched between us while my pulse hammered hard enough to hurt. I had spent years building careful walls around my life. Work, sleep, bills, repeat, safe, predictable. Then Adrian Blackwood arrived bleeding into my emergency room and somehow tore straight through all of it with a single look. Vincent cleared his throat gently near the door. We should move Grace somewhere secure for a few days. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. Adrian never looked away from me. You are staying with me until this is handled. That is not your decision. It became my decision the second someone came looking for you. Anger flashed through me then, hot enough to overpower fear. You do not get to control my life because you are used to everyone obeying you. The room went silent. Vincent actually looked nervous for me. But Adrian only stared at me for a long moment before something unexpected happened. He smiled. Slow. Real. Dangerous in a completely different way now. There she is, he murmured softly. The brave nurse who argued with doctors to save a stranger. My heartbeat stumbled hard against my ribs. You are impossible. Adrian stepped closer carefully despite the pain. It clearly caused him. And yet, he said quietly, eyes locked on mine, you are still here. At 8:02 that morning, sunlight finally broke through the clouds above Chicago, spilling pale gold across the ICU windows like the city had decided to pretend none of the darkness from last night had happened. Nurses changed shifts. Phones rang downstairs. Coffee carts rattled through the halls. Normal life moved forward. But inside Adrian Blackwood's room, nothing felt normal anymore. I stood near the window with my arms crossed tightly, while trying not to think about the woman downstairs pretending to be my aunt, or the fact that armed security now followed me every time I stepped into the hallway. Adrian sat quietly against the raised hospital bed, watching me with those impossible gray eyes that somehow noticed everything I tried to hide. You are angry, he said softly. I let out a quiet laugh. You think? I think you are overwhelmed. That word hit too close to the truth. I turned toward the city outside instead of looking at him. Yesterday, I was worrying about rent and student loans. Today, complete strangers are searching my hospital records because I saved your life. Adrian's voice stayed calm behind me. I know. Do you? I faced him then. Because this is not normal for me, Adrian. For the first time since I met him, something vulnerable flickered briefly across his face. Gone almost instantly. But I saw it. Nothing about me is normal, Grace. Silence stretched softly between us. Honest. Heavy. Then why do I feel safer when you are near? The question escaped before I could stop it. Adrian looked almost surprised by my honesty. Then his expression softened in a way that made my heartbeat stumble painfully hard. Because I would burn this city down before I let anything happen to you. My breath caught completely. Dangerous men should not sound gentle saying terrifying things. The door opened quietly before I could answer. Vincent stepped inside carrying my purse and folded jacket from the staff locker room. Your shift officially ended 30 minutes ago, he said carefully. And hospital administration suddenly approved your emergency leave request. I blinked. My what? Vincent glanced toward Adrian with the exhaustion of a man used to impossible conversations. Apparently you requested 3 paid days off. I stared directly at Adrian. You bribed my supervisor? I prefer the word persuaded. You cannot control every problem with money. Adrian's gaze held mine steadily. Watch me. Against every ounce of logic in my body, I laughed. Actual laughter. Sharp and exhausted and completely inappropriate considering the situation. Adrian stared at me afterward like the sound mattered more than anything else in the room. There it is again, he murmured quietly. What? You forgetting to be afraid of me. My smile faded slowly after that because he was right. Somewhere between midnight and sunrise, fear had changed into something far more dangerous. Trust. I should not have trusted Adrian Blackwood. Everything about him belonged to headlines and whispered warnings. But he had looked at me all night like I mattered beyond convenience, beyond obligation. Nobody had done that in a very long time. Vincent cleared his throat gently again. The car is ready downstairs. My stomach tightened immediately. Leaving the hospital suddenly made this entire situation feel real in a completely different way. Adrian noticed my hesitation instantly. Grace. His voice softened. Look at me. I did. You are safe with me. The certainty in his eyes made my chest ache unexpectedly. I nodded once before I could overthink it. Vincent stepped outside to prepare the hallway while I grabbed my jacket slowly with trembling hands. Adrian stood carefully despite the obvious pain pulling at his ribs. You should not be walking yet, I said automatically. One side of his mouth curved faintly. You say that like I listen. I rolled my eyes while helping steady the 4-line beside him. You are the worst patient I have ever had. And yet you stayed. My fingers paused against the blanket. Adrian reached for my hand slowly this time, giving me every chance to pull away. I did not. His thumb brushed lightly across my knuckles while morning sunlight spilled across the room around us. Warm, quiet, almost unreal after the longest night of my life. Grace, he said softly. What happens after this? I whispered before I could stop myself. Adrian looked at me the same way he had the moment he first woke up. Like the answer mattered. Like I mattered. That depends, he said quietly. Are you planning to stop saving me? My heart betrayed me completely then. Because standing inside that hot